Today. On behalf of the APEC Business Advisory Council, also known as ABAC, I'd like to welcome you here to a press conference following the closing plenary of ABAC 4 in the Philippines. With us today are the chair of ABAC Philippines, and Ms. Doris Magsaysay-Ho. She's joined by other ABAC members from member economies. We've got Sir Rod Eddington from Australia. We've got Tony Noel from New Zealand and Suzuki-san from Japan. We've just concluded ABAC today with a closing plenary, so I'd like to turn you over now to Ms. Doris Magsaysay-Ho to give a press statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mabina, and thank you so much, members of the press, for being here. I'm pleased to report that we, the APEC Business Advisory Council leaders, and with me are the working group chairs, have wrapped our final meeting for 2015 as we prepare to meet the APEC leaders for our annual dialogue. As always, the goal of our dialogue is to provide the business perspective on what we believe needs to be done to sustain economic growth and generate jobs in our region. Our recommendations this year address the current challenges faced by both policymakers and business. We see them as twofold. The first is to generate new drivers of growth. Predominantly export-led growth is now giving way to more balanced growth with domestic demand playing a bigger role. The middle income trap is setting in some economies. The second is that while millions have been lifted out of poverty as a result of prosperity created by the integration of the APEC region, income inequality has been rising. At the same time, we face challenges to the sustainability of growth with dwindling natural resources, the rising demand for food and energy, and ever-present threat of natural disasters. We have proposed, as a response to these challenges, recommendations aimed at developing opportunities in new sectors of the economy, principally in services, and in expanding the participation of micro, small, and medium industries, MSMEs, to internationalize them into the global markets. We also need to increase productivity and sustainable use of resources through innovation, enhancing connectivity, strengthening financial markets, and making our economies resilient to shocks. Particularly important is to encourage innovation to the development of the digital internet agenda and its ecosystems. All our recommendations are in our report to leaders with this year's theme of resilient, inclusive growth, a fair deal for all, which we are distributing out to all of you. I will highlight some of these key recommendations. The first, services make a significant contribution to economic growth and to promote inclusiveness. The key to unlocking the potential of services as an engine for growth lies in promoting its provision across borders, thus spurring efficiency and increased availability. Most of the impediments to service trade are not at the border, but beyond the border in the form of regulations. Until recently, APEC has not paid much attention to these impediments. They do now, and we are collaborating in these efforts by bringing the voices of business into it. The second is MSMEs. MSMEs make up more than 97% of business and employ over 60% of the region's workforce. Yet, they account for less than 30% of exports. We have found through research and dialogues that the reason for such low participation in exports includes complex customs requirements, access to foreign markets, and financing. Many of these impediments can be addressed by a robust cross-border e-commerce infrastructure and e-payment system, and so we have urged governments to take action to create a supportive ecosystem as a major step towards empowering MSMEs to go international. This year, we have also intensified and broadened the interaction between the public and private sector in an effort to encourage the adoption of the right policies to address impediments to growth in vital sectors including financial markets, mining, and energy. We work with APEC senior officials to organize dialogues on sustainable cities, on persons with disabilities, on participation of women in the economy, and preparing the youth for an economically integrated region. We will carry on the momentum we have generated on through the succeeding ABAC chairs, beginning with Peru, who have adopted the theme quality growth and human development. One of the major efforts next year to be spearheaded by Peru is in enhancing the rule of law across economies as they affect business operations. Our work through the years have been underpinned by our firm conviction that an open, predictable, and transparent environment for the free flow of goods, services, and investments is a necessary condition to generate new growth opportunities and in responding to these changing dynamics of the global economy. A free trade area of the Asia Pacific provides the comprehensive framework for achieving this enabling environment, and so we welcome developments towards its realization. The completion of the TPP negotiations is a significant step as we build pathways to the FTAP and encourage the RCEP negotiations to come to successful conclusion soon. Thank you, and we'd be happy to answer questions.
Please feel free to ask questions now. We have a short question and answer period. Thank you. If you would just like to stand up and identify yourselves, your name and the publication you work for. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I'd ask Rod Eddington to talk more about the work we're doing on FTAP and maybe services as well.
Thanks, Doris. As many of you who follow these issues will know, the TPP, a Trans-Pacific Partnership, which involves 12 of the 21 APEC countries, so it doesn't involve every country. The negotiations have been concluded, but the deal is still to be ratified by the member countries. So one of the things we did under Doris's chairmanship is to write a letter which basically will go to the leaders of all the countries involved, encouraging those that are involved to ratify the TPP through their own government systems. That we see as a key forerunner to the bigger opportunity which involves all the APEC countries, which is the free trade agreement in the Asia Pacific area. And that's an opportunity for further trade liberalisation within APEC. It includes countries that aren't involved in TPP, and it should underpin continued growth in inclusive growth to allow particularly the more developing nation economies to participate more fully in the economic opportunities in APEC. So we see trade liberalisation in general and the FTAP agreement in particular when it comes to negotiation as a major opportunity to drive inclusive growth in the APEC economies. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. There's a question here.
Yes,
please
sir.
go ahead.
Hi, my name is Fidri Shaminan from the Brunei Times. I've got 3 very quick questions here. The first one is, with the recent conclusion of the TPP talks, should the relevant leaders now look into finalizing RCEP talks to expedite the formation of the proposed FTAP? And how significant is Brunei's role in realizing this initiative, considering that it is one of the countries with very few trade restrictions? And the second one is barrier. What is the biggest barrier that prevents women's involvement in business within ASEAN? Thank you.
Do you want to answer first?
Thanks.
First, the TPP.
Yeah, I'll take the first one. You're right. The negotiations on the TPP have been concluded, but the agreement still needs to be ratified by all the member governments. And one of the reasons the ABAC group have drafted and will write to all the leaders in the TPP, in fact to all leaders in APEC, encouraging them to move as quickly as they can for ratification of TPP, is that the reality of these sorts of agreements is until the TPP is ratified and comes into force, governments won't turn their attention to FTAP. And you're right, there are important economies in APEC, including your own, which are not necessarily part of TPP and will be part of FTAP. So we recognise the pragmatic reality, which is while TPP is still to be ratified, so that the negotiations have been concluded, but the deal is still to be ratified by the member states. Until that is done, we don't think we'll make real headway on FTAP. And FTAP is the big prize, not only for APEC, but particularly for the member countries in APEC that promote free trade but aren't part of TPP. Thank you for the question.
Okay, if I may answer the second part about ASEAN. I think ASEAN has, all of our economies in ASEAN have a particularly amazing opportunity today because we all have very young, vibrant populations. And what we tried to do this year was to identify where they could start participating and take advantage to benefit from this amazing thing called integration and open markets. Where we saw that the greatest opportunity lies in services. And there are very many regulatory reforms that do need to be addressed across the border. A lot of services are value chains. It's being able to apply services, whether part of somebody's global value chain or just part of services. And so there are many issues we have to address, some of which are on the certification, the mutual recognition of certifications, mobility, I mean, basically, having the assurance that people who move across offering services have the same qualifications across. But the greatest opportunity we see is bringing SMEs, or anybody for that matter, into global trade through e-commerce. So we see that as a very exciting part, and innovation. And so the two areas that have to be addressed are how economies can build their innovation ecosystems, education, incubators, engineering, research labs. And the second, of course, is how do we address the barriers to e-commerce, to trading across borders. You saw the amazing trades in China, one-day single trade, and the opportunity for that is fantastic. So it could be either trading goods or services. And we made a report with the USC Marshall School. We have a 21 economy survey on where the impediments are, and if you can leave me your card, I'm happy to link you to it. Thank you.
Perhaps, Chair, if I could make a comment also, specifically in response to your question about the role that Brunei can play in moving RCEP towards FTAP. Of course, Brunei must be congratulated because it's been in this game for a very long time. Brunei was part of the P4, obviously, and the P4 has then evolved, of course, into the TPP. So Brunei has a very important role to play in showing its colleagues in the ASEAN world how that can benefit an economy, the way that it's benefited Brunei. Of course, Brunei is also part of the ANZFERTA agreement, Australia, New Zealand and ASEAN. And that, once again, is a very high-quality agreement. So I think Brunei, to your question, has the opportunity to show to its ASEAN colleagues and its Asian colleagues that if you engage in high-quality and far-reaching agreements, it's not something to fear, it's something to encourage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Maybe I could ask Suzuki-san to say a few words about the program on financial inclusion.
Thank you, Doris. Thank you very much for this opportunity. This year, under the strong leadership of Philippines, we have a very good progress in financing. As all of you clearly understand that finance is always side by side with the real economy. And also the big agenda for the APEC region is to how to give the opportunity for the MSMEs, micro, small and medium enterprises for the future growth. And the TPP is one of the aspects. Finance is other. And I'm very happy to report that we as a ABAC closely worked with finance minister's process, and in September, on the occasion of finance minister Cebu meeting, finance ministers adopted Cebu action plan, which is the kind of first time mid to long term roadmap for finance minister's process, which include a lot of recommendations from business side. And also they established, side by side with the private, an initiative which is called APFF, Asia Pacific Financial Forum. It was established about 2 years ago. And also this time, Financial Infrastructure Development Network. So with this strong platform for the cooperation between public and private, I think we can move things forward. And it really creates a big opportunity to let the capital flow to MSMEs as well as other enterprises in a very smooth manner. So with that, I'd like to conclude my remarks.
Thank you. And, okay, go ahead.
Warren de Guzman, ANC, for the panel. Why has ABAC chosen to push for TPP when the Philippines itself has said that the APEC Secretariat has said that they don't want to push for any particular trade agreement? Also, why not any of the other, there are 150 FTAs there, RCEP, and why TPP?
I'm going to ask Tony Noel. Since I think...
Okay, look, I think... Sorry, Chair. The first thing to say to your question is that ABAC is not specifically pushing for TPP. TPP is one of a number of building blocks that we believe are important to achieve a free trade area of the Asia Pacific. So the building blocks at the moment that we logically have in front of us are TPP is one building block, RCEP is another building block, the Pacific Alliance with the South American and Central American countries is another building block. I would also say that the ANSFERTA agreement that I referenced to the last question, which is the ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand FTA, is another building block towards a free trade area of the Asia Pacific. Now, these four agreements are moving at a different pace. Some of them are already signed, ANSFERTA is already signed, Pacific Alliance is already being implemented, and RCEP is moving perhaps a little slower than TPP is moving, although TPP, of course, is not yet ratified. It's not actually signed. The negotiation is for the time being finished, but the signature is not there. But ultimately, what the business community is looking for is a free trade area of the Asia Pacific. Now that aligns very significantly to what were originally the Bogor goals of free and open trade, and with a target of 2020 to achieve that objective. So TPP, yes, it's an important building block. So ABAC is saying that we congratulate the TPP economies for achieving an endpoint to that negotiation, and we see that as another important building block towards FTAP.
Just a clarification, but you will be writing a letter to the TPP members to encourage the ratification?
We will be writing a letter to the TPP members that congratulates them on achieving an endpoint to their negotiation. And in that letter, we'll be referencing the importance of TPP as a building block towards FTAP, which is our ultimate objective.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, good morning. I'm Ben De Vera, a reporter of the Philippine Daily Inquirer. I'm just curious, what does ABAC think about the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIIB? Do you think we need another multilateral lender like that when we have already the World Bank and the ADB? And of course, some of the member economies of APEC, like the United States and Japan, are not yet prospective members of the AIIB. So for the private sector, do we need the AIIB?
Thank you so much for your question. First of all, we have not discussed, particularly in an AIIB issue. Rather, we discussed a big picture. And as the ADB issued a report more than 3 years ago, that there are huge demand of money and the huge size of the infrastructure investment to be expected to take place in Asia-Pacific region, and amount, it is set at $8 trillion. And $8 trillion is a kind of big size of money that the single nation or economy or composition of the number of nations even can't pay. So how to fill the gap is a kind of first priority issue for this region. And that's a part of the reason public-private partnership is a key for every and all infrastructure project. In that context, how to introduce private money into individual projects is a kind of key. So we have been working on some infrastructure checklist issue, et cetera, and how to bring the long-term investors' money, like pension funds money or insurance companies' money into that. But also important thing is multilateral organizations' role. It's not particularly in AIIB, but also ADB, World Bank, all those initiatives. And in our introducing private money, those are like pension funds, insurance companies. We have to be careful in structuring the project itself, because all those investors under heavy duty of, let's say, fiduciary types of, fiduciary duty is a kind of key for their governance. So we need some transparency in each project, as well as the well-structured, so that they can invest long-term money into that. So we very much welcome those multilateral organizations to put money on that. And there are some discussions we understand about the governance. But still, with good governance and good structure, we very much welcome the multilateral organizations' money.
Thank you. Yes, you had a follow-up question?
Yes, please proceed with what you want.
No, go ahead.
I'm just curious, you said that it hasn't really been on the radar of ABAC, but perhaps in the future, maybe you can, are you considering including the initiatives of the AIB, especially for under the Cebu Action Plan? One of the pillars is infrastructure development, and of course it was highlighted that there's a need to finance infrastructure projects across the region.
He was asking why we don't discuss this issue of AIEB.
Or perhaps in the future, perhaps maybe, will it be part of the APEC agenda, ABAC?
It's in the APEC agenda.
Look, it is an important issue for the Asian region. Each individual government has its own position on the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Like many countries, Australia has joined and is committed to supporting and being involved with the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. But that's not true for every APEC country. Not all APEC countries have decided to be involved, and it's a matter for each individual country. So it's not an issue that APEC can speak to collectively with any authority. It's really up to each individual country to articulate its position. Some countries joined straight away, and of course countries that aren't part of APEC have joined the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The UK is a good example, but some APEC countries have chosen not to join it at this point in time. So it's not an issue that APEC can talk about collectively with the same sort of authority as the issues that Tony and Suzuki-san have discussed.
Is that fine?
Yes, thank you.
Good. I'd like to ask Tony Noel to speak on one of the areas that we consider really important in sustainability, and that is on the way ABAC is working and engaging with the ministers on food security. Tony?
Well, thank you, Chair. Food security, a very, very big issue for ABAC, a very big issue for this region, and it's been a key focus this year, particularly here in the Philippines year, when we're looking at how can we bring the small farmers, the smallholders, the fisher folk into the supply chain and increase their livelihood at the same time as increasing the food security for the country and for the region. Historically, food security has been something that's been largely managed by governments. But of course, food is produced and supplied largely by private enterprise, whether it's small individuals or whether it is large corporations. In the last few years, we've been driving a discussion within ABAC with officials, with governments, under the form of a public sector, private sector dialogue on the issue of food security. Now, of course, you can understand probably that from the business perspective, we believe that one of the best ways, in fact, ultimately the best way to give food security to the region is to have free trade in food. But that has a number of not insignificant issues around that. We see today some countries in the region pursuing policies of self-sufficiency. Whilst we can understand that at a human level, at a psychological level, in fact, from an environmental perspective and an economic perspective, that can be actually quite damaging to economies. And we certainly promote the concept of environmental comparative advantage, which says that you should use the best environments to grow a particular product in which they will grow best, and you use other environments to grow other products in which they will grow best, and then you have free trade to share the product across that comparative advantage. What we're trying to achieve, importantly, is a safe, nutritious, and sufficient supply of food to the peoples of the region. As I said, the smallholders are a very important part of that equation. And it's critically important that we increasingly use technology. We had a meeting in Iloilo 1 month ago, very much focusing on these issues, and we talked a lot about introducing new technologies into the food chain, and new technologies that can allow less waste, much better monitoring of production, etc. Using the Internet of Things, I'm sure you've heard about, and the cloud to facilitate that is becoming important in agriculture and food production. Also very important is the issue of services. Many, many services are required to have an efficient food trade and ultimately to have food security. So we are strongly encouraging that governments also open up the opportunity for services to be shared across the region, to be exported between economies, once again to underwrite this issue of food security. Probably the most concerning issue for us is the issue of non-tariff barriers and non-tariff measures. We see through the measurements of the World Trade Organization, the WTO, that non-tariff barriers are rising quite dramatically at this point in time. Many of those are in the food trade. And this is difficult because at the same time that we are having a discussion about TPP and RCEP in a free trade area of the Asia Pacific on one side of the coin, on the other side of the coin, we're seeing increasing protectionism trends. And non-tariff barriers and non-tariff measures are probably the most graphic example of those protectionism trends. So we will be focusing in 2016 very heavily on the identification of the most egregious, the most damaging non-tariff barriers, so we can strongly encourage governments to take action against those. The importance of e-commerce in food. Last week I visited China, and I was spending quite a lot of my time in China focusing on e-commerce for food. And this is rapidly increasing, particularly, of course, today for those products that do not need refrigeration, do not need a cold chain. But also, we are starting to see the evolution of e-commerce through the cold chain. This gives great opportunities to your smallholders to actually enter the regional supply chain and ultimately the global supply chain and value chain. So that's a very, very big issue. The importance of the cold chain and the cool chain to reduce loss. We all know a very simple concept, refrigeration, but it's actually quite scary when you go out there and look at how poorly refrigeration is in economies right through the supply chain, whether it's on ships, whether it's in trucks, whether it's in supermarkets. Still we see around the region some supermarkets who turn off the refrigeration at night when they close the supermarket, thinking that the product will maintain its temperature. Of course it does not. It's unsafe, and it creates a lot of loss. The last thing that I would reference also is the issue of the rule of law. We have a lot of problems in the region from a rule of law perspective with the ownership of land and the control of land. And of course, an orderly, proper control of land and ownership of land is necessary if we're going to see the private sector invest the amounts of money that we need to see to develop more productivity from that land. So rule of law also becomes an issue of more focus for us. I will leave it at that, Chair. Thank you, and take any questions.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. No?
I think we can end.
No questions?
No questions?
Okay, if there are no burning questions, I want to thank you all very much for being here with us. And as I mentioned, we have our report to leaders available for you. It's also on abaconline.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to also remind you that tomorrow we have the SME Summit, the APEC SME Summit, taking place at the Green Sun Hotel in Pasang Tamo, Makati. And we have a press conference there at 11:30. And you're all invited to come. Hope we see you there. Thank you.
Okay.
It was well said.